Okay, so we've got uh, some really heavy stuff to dive into today.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
this is material that you sent to us that's really focused on this idea of why suicide is not the answer.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
importantly, like, how can people find strength and happiness
Hmm.
when they are going through
Yeah.
really, really, really tough times?
Absolutely.
And I think that, we really want to pull out in this deep dive, like,
Yeah.
what are the core reasons
Yeah.
that your source is present for not giving up?
Yeah.
But we want to do it in a way that acknowledges, that
Right.
people are in pain, that it's real,
Yeah.
and that there are pathways towards hope.
Absolutely. And I think, to start, it's really important to acknowledge that pain.
Yeah.
Like if you're listening to this and you're in the midst of depression or anxiety, you're feeling lonely, you're dealing with the aftermath of trauma.
Right.
These aren't just like, feelings that people talk about. These are real things. And they can be overwhelming.
Right.
And as your sources point out, like
Yeah.
struggling with those feelings is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that like life is really hard sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, one thing that really comes through
Yeah.
in this material is this idea that, suicide doesn't end the pain.
Right.
It really just shifts it to other people.
Yeah, it transfers the pain
Yeah.
to everyone who's left behind.
Yeah. And I think about, all the people who would be left
Yeah.
with these unanswered questions,
Absolutely.
and just this deep grief
Uh-huh.
that would just ripple out,
Right.
and affect so many lives.
And it really makes you think about, like the
Yeah.
the permanence of that decision.
Yeah.
That like once that choice is made, there's no going back.
Yeah.
And your sources really talk about how that eliminates the possibility of things getting better.
Yeah.
And we know that like human experience is often cyclical. There are periods of darkness,
Yeah.
but they're often followed by periods of light.
Right.
And there's this quote that really stuck with me that said things can get better.
Yeah.
And it's not just like a nice sentiment. It's really reflective of like the dynamic nature of life.
Right.
And the potential for healing and growth, even when we're in the midst of really hard things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, if ending it all isn't the answer,
Right.
let's look at what your sources say
Yeah.
about reasons to hold on, reasons to keep fighting.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really resonated with me
Yeah.
is this idea that emotional pain is temporary. And I love the analogy that they use,
Yeah.
where they compare emotions to waves,
Right.
that they rise with this intensity and then they crash.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they recede.
They always recede.
And I think that that's so insightful because
Yeah.
it reminds us that even our most overwhelming feelings are not permanent states.
Exactly. And, when you're in the midst of that emotional storm,
Yeah,
it can feel like it's never going to end.
right.
But, understanding that emotions have a life cycle, that they do subside,
Yeah.
can offer a glimmer of hope.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
like, if you think about how our minds and bodies work, like, we're not designed to stay in that state of super high stress forever.
Right.
And our perception of time can get really distorted
Yeah.
when we're in distress. So it can make those feelings feel like they're never going to end.
Yeah.
So just recognizing that that's happening
Right.
can be really helpful.
Yeah. And another reason that these sources talk about,
Yeah.
for holding on is this idea that each of us has a significant impact on the world.
Right.
And often in ways that we don't even realize.
Uh-huh.
They kind of gently remind us
Yeah.
that you matter.
You matter
to your family.
Yeah.
You matter to your friends.
Right.
You even matter to people who you might touch indirectly.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's such a powerful counter
Yeah.
to this feeling of being insignificant or being a burden.
It is. And do they talk at all about like
Yeah.
how to hold on to that understanding when you're feeling
Right.
really isolated?
Yes, they do. And
Yeah.
actually they talk about,
Okay.
kind of reflecting on your connections,
Yeah.
even the small ones.
Right.
Like maybe you had a brief positive interaction with a stranger or a moment of shared laughter with a colleague,
Yeah.
or even, the comfort that you provide to a pet.
Right.
They say, like these small moments,
Yeah.
they add up
They do.
and they really paint this picture
Uh-huh.
of how interconnected we all are
Yeah.
and that your absence would leave a void.
It's about kind of shifting that focus,
Yeah.
from your own internal pain
Right.
to that external web of relationships.
Oh,
Yeah.
and recognizing that you're a part of that.
And then there's this idea of like,
Yes.
the possibility of experiencing joy again.
Yeah.
And I thought this was so powerful that they said, think of the happiest moment of your life.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just like a nostalgic exercise.
Right.
It's really about remembering that joy was possible and that it can happen again.
Right.
And that's huge because,
Yeah.
when you're feeling so down,
Yeah.
it's like you can forget that you ever felt joy.
Right, and connecting to those past positive emotions can really serve as an anchor in those difficult times because it reminds us that we're capable of happiness.
Right.
It's not like this is all there is. Like we've felt joy before we can feel it again.
Exactly.
And the sources actually suggest really actively recalling the details of those moments. What did you see? What did you hear?
What did you smell? What did you feel?
Yeah.
Because that can really help bring back those feelings.
Right. And another really important point that comes up is this idea that help is available. And they specifically mention, therapy support groups, crisis hotlines as resources that are designed to help people through challenging times.
Yeah, and that's crucial, you don't have to go through this alone. Like these resources exist to support you. To help you find a pathway forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how those different types of support can be beneficial?
So therapy, in its various forms, provides a structured and confidential space to really explore your emotions.
Yeah.
Understand the patterns that might be contributing to your struggles and then develop coping strategies.
Right.
And there are different therapeutic approaches like CBT or DBT.
That offer specific tools for managing distress and building resilience.
Right.
Support groups are amazing because they connect people who are facing similar challenges.
Yeah.
So you don't feel so alone. You have that sense of community. You can share experiences. You can learn from each other.
Right.
And then crisis hotlines are there for immediate support.
Yeah.
If you're in acute distress, they offer a listening ear and guidance in the moment.
Right. And, I think when you're in so much pain, this idea of choosing happiness can seem impossible.
They can.
But, these sources acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And they're not saying like you're going to have this dramatic transformation.
Right.
But it's about taking small actionable steps.
Yeah.
And so let's break some of those down.
Okay.
The first one is just reaching out. And they give such practical examples like texting a friend, calling a helpline.
Just saying, I'm not okay.
Right.
And that simple act of voicing your struggle can be the very first step toward getting support.
That step can often feel like the hardest, but it's also the most important because it breaks that cycle of isolation.
Right.
We can get so trapped in our pain because of shame, because of fear.
Yeah.
And just by expressing your distress,
Right.
you're allowing other people to support you.
Yeah.
You're letting them know, like, hey, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And I need some help.
And another step that they recommend is this practice of identifying one good thing today. And I love that they give such small and accessible examples.
Right.
Like a warm cup of tea, favorite song, sunlight through a window.
Right.
And the act of, consciously focusing on even one positive element can be such a shift.
It is, and perspective. And it's really about, like the power of attention and the fact that our brains tend to focus on the negative.
Yeah.
So by intentionally seeking out and acknowledging those small moments of comfort or pleasure, we're actually training our brains to notice the good.
Yeah.
And those small positive moments can act as anchors to remind us that even in darkness, there can be light.
And they also talk about the role of professionals.
Yes.
Specifically therapists. And I think it's important to emphasize that, therapy is not just for severe cases.
Yeah.
It's a valuable resource.
Absolutely.
For anyone who needs support. And the perspective that they offer is that happiness isn't about the absence of problems.
Right.
It's about finding light despite the darkness. And therapists can really help people in that journey.
Therapists are trained to provide that safe, non-judgmental space to explore those difficult emotions and thoughts. And they can help you understand the root causes
of your struggles, develop coping mechanisms, and build resilience.
Yeah.
So it's like they're giving you this toolkit for managing those difficult emotions and building a more fulfilling life.
And it's so important that your sources give these specific resources.
Absolutely.
You know, if you are in the U.S., the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 988.
That's right.
And that's a direct line to support in a crisis.
Yeah.
And then they also have the crisis text line, which is you can text HOME to 741-741.
That's a good one.
And then for listeners outside the U.S., you know, they encourage you to do a quick online search for local helplines.
Absolutely.
And these are so important.
They are. It's like having an emergency contact list.
Yeah.
You know, you have these resources available in case you need them.
Right.
Or in case someone you know needs them.
Yeah. And I think this message is so powerful.
You are worthy of love, help, and a future. Don't let a temporary storm convince you it's the end of your story.
That's so important because, you know, when you're in that despair, it can be hard to believe that you're worthy or that there's a future beyond that pain. So that direct affirmation is really powerful because it cuts through that negative self-talk and reminds you that you have value, that you're not defined by your struggles.
So bringing it all together, you know, the core message here is stay. Keep fighting. Reach out for support.
That's it.
And I love that they say the world needs you.
The world needs you.
Even when it feels like the furthest thing from the truth.
Even when you feel completely alone, the world still needs you.
And they also have this really important call to action for everyone listening, which is check on your loved ones. And they say a simple, how are you really can save a life.
It can.
And that's so true.
It is, because that question can open up a space for real communication. It lets the other person know that you're there to listen without judgment, like you care. And it can be the invitation that someone needs to open up about their struggles to feel seen and heard, to know that they're not alone. So it's a small thing. But it can make a huge difference.
And the final message that they give is choose hope. Choose help.
Choose help.
And keep going.
Keep going.
And I love that because it's so concise. And it's actionable.
It is.
It's like they're saying you have the power
you do
to choose a path towards healing.
Towards healing and resilience.
So, you know, as we wrap up this really important deep dive. I want you to think about those small steps that we talked about. Those tiny actions that can bring a little bit of light into your situation. What's one tiny action that you can take today? Maybe it's stepping outside, getting some sunlight on your skin, listening to a piece of music. That brings you comfort. Reaching out to one person that you trust. Just take a moment to think about that. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
For this really important conversation.